The After Hours is basically Rod Serling as a poet. Look, let's be honest. Rod Serling's major talent was the ability to translate previous classical stories, turning them into modern parallels, sometimes offering a phantasmagorical touch. I mean, that is a fucking flex as a writer. But anyway, The After Hours. Rod was a guy who was an adapter, I think. A very good adapter. So, did he actually take the bones of another story for this original teleplay? This is Rod Serling as a poet, as I wish to absolutely hammer home. There's a John Collier story called Evening Promises. And Evening Promises takes place in a fucking department store, just like The After Hour. We know that Rod Serling knew Collier. Incidentally, why is Richard Collier, the protagonist in Bid Time Return, translated into Somewhere in Time by Richard Matheson, who also wrote for The Twilight Zone? Did he know something? Yeah, you see where I'm getting at? I've been trying to research how Rod Serling came up with the story because, again, he was more of an adapter. Like, let's take The Silence. No, that's the fucking story where the guy has to not speak for a year and then he slices his throat at the end because he can't speak. Yeah, that's based off of Chekhov's The Bell. Basically, my argument here is that Rod Serling was a significantly excellent reader, which made him an excellent adapter. But then you have something like the fucking After Hours, which is like poetry. And you say to yourself, is Rod Serling adapting something? Going back to Collier. I've read the Collier story. I've seen both the 60s and the 1980s remake of The After Hour. I just rewatched it tonight. And I think, yeah, he probably took from Collier. But he's kind of riffing on Collier because what Rod Serling comes up with in this story is poetic and beautiful. I mean, everything about this episode is operating on all motherfucking thrusters, which is why Dan Erickson stole the bones of this story to some extent, a minor extent, for this week's episode of Severance, naming his episode The After Hour. Yeah, I feel I should be that guy taping all these fucking connections, but I'm sorry, I'm geeking out. Anyway, the reason why The After Hours is one of Rod Serling's most underrated and most beautiful scripts is because it really shows that he was an adapter on a higher fucking level. I mean, I love The Silence, but The After Hours is poetry. The Silence is just a really solid adaptation of Chekhov. But The After Hours shows that, given the right circumstances, Rod Serling could adapt in a way that transcended the original source, which is why Dan Erickson was so fucking inspired for this week's episode of Severance, which is why all of we Twilight Zone nerds really fucking know The After Hours, and we'll always hold that fucking story up as the definitive article. Okay, I think I'm done.